time that I had to produce this book fast. Because as you know, I was telling you that when Pakiza was released in Maratha Mandir, the first 2 weeks of Pakiza, it bombed. The film was an absolute box office disaster. Then Meena Kumari died, and the film went through the ceiling. So the joke in those days was that Kamal Amrohi had organized Meena Kumari's death for his film.
No, but you have to say, Vinod, I mean, that there are lives which are wonderfully served by their deaths, You could say that about Guru Dutt, you could say that about Meena Kumari. The death sort of elevated her into a kind of it sort of validated the life, the tragedy queen life that she was living, The death ratified it, it validated it, it kind of gave it it gave a justification to the life in a sense, I remember when I was very young, they made a film on this, There was a guy, there was a film made called Meena Kumari Ki Amar Kahani. So the life and the death, became a kind of, the death allowed us to celebrate the life in a way, Exactly like, with Guru Dutt, for instance.
What was happening was, Pakiza was possibly the worst film she made. It was a very bad film. And it was probably her
not so bad.
Music, except for the music.
Arguably the most romantic line in Hindi cinema.
A great film. But I think that the kind of box office success it enjoyed was undeserving. And as you're saying, it was homage to Meena Kumari.
But it enjoys posthumous success. I mean, even now people watch it. It's not like.
And you must say, why everybody always says it's set in Lucknow when it isn't?
It's set in Mehboob studio, yeah. They never went to Lucknow.
But it never claims to go to Lucknow.
Yeah, I mean...
And Suhagpur and...
Yeah.
But I think that one is the film that people... I mean, that's the film I think many people see. And I mean, certainly it appears in London, certainly in many gay and lesbian film festivals because of this status Meena Kumari has as a gay icon in the West, the tragedy queen like Judy Garland, and that seems to be a huge part of her afterlife now.
Yes, I think that the tragedy queen is, but I think in more serious festivals, she's identified with Choti Bahu, I think, Sahab Bibi or Gulab.
Much more.
Not so much in Pakiza.
Much more so, but Pakiza I think continues to remain popular.
I'll tell you a story about Pakiza which is very interesting. By the time Pakiza was shot, she was at an advanced state of cirrhosis. And part of the film had been shot 17, 18 years ago. And she didn't finish the film. So when she restarted the film, she couldn't dance because of the cirrhosis in her stomach. So in many of the songs that she sings, there's a double. It's not Meena Kumari, because Meena Kumari couldn't do it because of the advanced state of...
Yeah, you can see it in some of the cuts actually, You can see how, I mean, if you watch it closely.
Close up, dikhate hain film.
Yeah.
Whenever there is very strong round movement,
there is a chakkar and stuff,
It's a double.
He pulls out to a long shot,
Yeah.
Why do you think Amrohi was happy to talk to you about the book?
Well, this book has... When I wrote this book, and then it had some moderate commercial success, and then it just went away. Then I wrote my biography of Lucknow Boy, which enjoyed some measure of commercial success. So the publisher said, what else have you written? So I said, I've written a biography of Sanjay Gandhi and Meena Kumari. So I played no role in the reissuing of the book. It was a commercial HarperCollins suggestion. And what the editor of HarperCollins told me is, book has gone into second print, which is for a reissue. She said that they're not going to lose money on it, which is quite... Now, why people in 2013 find Meena Kumari of 1962 interesting, unless if you're from that generation, then it's interesting. But if you're 30 years old, I don't know, that's something you could write a book about.
What other film personality, Vinod, if you were to write about another film personality, which one would it be?
Huh?
If you were to write a book
today
Today,
on a film star.
on a film star.
Never, never, no, I would never write a book. I mean, a lot of people have asked me, Dara Singh, by the way, asked me to write about after he died, so I said no to Dara Singh.
One of my students went and interviewed Dara Singh for her research on action cinema.
Which one?
A former student of mine wrote about Dara Singh in a book on action cinema.
Action cinema.
Yeah,
Dara Singh.
You know, I've got a few years left in my life now. I'm 71 years old. I don't want to write about film stars. I have other things to do. And I can't think of any film star which interests me. I can't think of anybody. I mean, can you imagine me writing a biography of Bipasha Basu or something like that?
But I think what's interesting here is this need that you have to have a journalist writing these kinds of books about people, because the industry isn't documented, so you need somebody who's going to go out and interview all these people, interview
I agree with you, but there are other people to do it.
Yeah.
You see, my biography of this film star was a one-off thing. It was not as if even today, I'm just about interested in Hindi films. I've got bigger fish to fry.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Like
You know,
Mr. I got Narendra Modi to fry.
Yes. No, but as a film scholar, as a student of Indian cinema, you know, when you see these larger than life heroines from the 50s, you know, and the kind of the halo kind of getting, you know, sort of smaller, and in a sense, you know, obviously it's the nature of how we relate, what the place of cinema in society and the kind of information that we have available. What is your take on Meena Kumari?
I think those heroines of the 50s do have a particular fascination. I mean, some of the earlier ones do, but Durga Kote wrote her autobiography. There's been quite a lot of writing on Fearless Nadia. But nothing really serious on these stars of the 50s. I mean, Kishore Desai brought out Darling Ji with Nargis's letters. But Madhubala, people don't really know very much about her. And indeed Lata Mangeshkar, who knows much about her? You know, a very interesting person, a hugely influential person, but we don't know much about her.
Quite.
And we don't even have, but not just the heroines. I mean, we don't have a real solid biography of Raj Kapoor even.
Yeah.
You know, so these gaps. But the heroines today, I mean, they're much more professional, they're much more private. You know, there aren't many who have very flamboyant or public lives, who kind of live it off screen.
That's right.
You know, we don't really know much about them.
That's right. I think that's also the nature of the change that we have seen in the industry in the last 20 years, you know, where people have become much more professional, much more sort of career oriented. In a sense, you know, our stars have become businessmen in the way that they never were in the 50s and 60s, you know, or even the 70s, you know. There was a kind of a throwaway air about the lives that they were leading, you know, whereas today they are much more sort of careful, sanitized, as you were saying.
There's one that I would like to see, and that's Salman Khan.
Yes, quite, you know, quite. I mean, you know, it would be, you know, it would be very nice to read about that life if it was a little more interesting, without accidents and stuff, you know. A little more sort of, you know, I mean to say, you know, a little more than filmy generosity to engage us, you know.
But a real biography.
Yes. Are you working on one?
No. But I'd love somebody else to.
Yes. So we could...
Yeah, what about the audience? Would the audience like to please? I don't know if there's a mic going around. I think there is. There's a mic coming. I'm here to the gentleman in purple.
I thank you all very much for talking about Meena Kumari. I've been a fan of hers ever since I started seeing movies. But one question related to the theme romance, love and violence, and also the unanswered question that Vinod Mehta asked you, madam. You see, the violence on Meena Kumari's life transcended the romance and love. And in the light of that, when Vinod Mehta's wonderful book, Life of Meena Kumari, was republished, it attracted a lot of attention among the generation that had not seen her on the screen. But why do you think the violence part of it attracted her? Or was it the general thread of tragedy in our lives? Or the fact that most of our lives are flawed, as Mr. Farooqi has mentioned? What could be the reason that people still want her brand?
Quite hard to hear.
Why are the lives flawed?
Flawed.
What is so interesting about a life that people...
Well,
younger
because
gener-
it's a very artificial, you live under the arc lights and you live in a sort of artificial make-believe world. And I think... What's happened?
I think the interest is really, you see somebody like Meena Kumari who is so beautiful and seems to have everything. She's rich, she's beautiful, she's talented, she mixes with a lot of interesting people, travels, and yet this deep unhappiness. And I think, whether it's her, whether it's Princess Diana, whoever it is, we're quite fascinated by these people and this idea of, what would make any of us happy, because they seem to have all the things we want, and yet it didn't make them happy. So what if that they have would make us happy? And I think that's the fascination. It's also how much somebody who's offered everything self-destructs. And again, how one should look after oneself, live one's life, and so on. And these people become almost guides to life for us. And some of these heroines really manage to make better lives for themselves, whereas Meena Kumari's was just a disaster, really. To die at 40 is of a self-inflicted illness is terrible.
Also, you must remember she was born in a chawl. She was born in a chawl in Mahim. And from that chawl, the rise and rise and rise. So I think that also is a giddy feeling. But I think Rachel would perhaps, it's a good subject here. Why are the film stars so self-destructive?
I think lots of people are self-destructive, but film stars, I think also when a lot of people become famous, they start believing stories about themselves.
Yeah.
Like she did, or Dilip Kumar has talked about how he sought psychiatry in London for help with over-identifying with his roles. I think people really find it hard when you become important and famous and rich. You get your hangers-on, your chumchas, who come and say everything you do is great, and nobody gives you any real critical feedback anymore. And, people just lose a grip with reality. I think we all want to be famous, but when people become famous, they often wish they weren't.
I think it's quite true. It's quite true what you're saying. People begin to buy into their own self-mythologies, And as a film star, you get many more chances. As a film star or a rock star or a music star, you get many more chances to do that, to be convinced of your own mythology than if you were in another profession, And that's part of the...
And so many people, just look at Rajesh Khanna. What happened to him?
Quite.
You have a question?
Anyway, I'm loud enough. With due respect to you and Mr. Gulzar, when you say Meena Kumari is a bad poet, I disagree. I don't know how many people have listened to her I Write, I Recite, and I think you're talking about that you had rum with I Write and I Recite, and you thought that she's such a mediocre. I feel Meena Kumari was a symbol for feminism and also opening up on gender and sexuality in cinema at that time when cinema was looked upon actually as a brothel, right? And koi अच्छे घर की लड़की नहीं जाएगी Hindi cinema mein. So you have to look at that context, and then also it's connecting with her life and what she went through. And I think she was symbolic enough and daring enough at that time to be so open. And in fact, what you said, I totally agree. It was sexist because Guru Dutt, what he faced to his death, and so did Meena Kumari. But how has society and even media played at it? And I mean, I would really like to know if you have read both the panelists here. I write, I recite, and maybe I thought it should have played here at the panel.
I mean, many people have read it because it's been included in Susie Taru's anthology of women writing in India. You know, that's one way that her poetry has become quite famous, even in translation. I hadn't heard such a low opinion of it before. I hadn't heard such a low opinion of Meena Kumari's poetry before. And I wish we actually had some of it that we could recite it here to actually know what it is and what it is. Because, I mean, why is it such bad poetry? I mean, you're a Lucknowi, maybe you know.
Well, have you heard? If you listen to it, you have. Well, let us say that our taste in poetry differ. Well, I found it over sentimental. I found one theme constantly in the poems about how difficult it is to find love and how it doesn't go beyond that.
No, there's no. It is effective poetry. It affects you. But I mean, you know, poetry may affect us sometimes without, you know, because, you know, she's coming from a terrain of Urdu poet.